From humble beginnings to being the best-selling vehicle in the US for 47 years running, the Ford F-Series in many ways defines the truck market and is the standard other truck manufacturers chase. But it wasn't always this way. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. If you're new here, I am John, and this is a far too brief history of the Ford F-Series. The idea of a Ford truck predates even the legendary Model T. In fact, in 1899, Henry Ford started his first attempt to build an auto company with the Detroit Automobile Company, and by 1900, its first and only product was released, a gas-powered delivery truck. The company floundered and was closed in 1901. By 1903, Ford Motor Company was founded, and some commercial vehicles were offered like this delivery van based on the Model C chassis. In 1908, the Ford Model T was released, and buyers had the option of a completed car or a chassis to take to a coachwork builder, and Ford offered multiple van options as well, such as ambulance or cargo. Thousands of Ts were modified to be trucks, tractors, and fire engines. In 1917, the Model TT was offered, with heavier-duty frame and rear axle, longer wheelbase, 125 inches versus 100 inches, and first as just a chassis, and then in 1924 with a factory-produced body. As this was during World War I, the first years were exclusively for the U.S. Army, but later years were offered to the public and once again used with a wide variety of bodies, including early school buses. For 1928, Ford replaced the Model T with the Model A and similarly offered their new truck, the Model AA. Sharing parts such as the body and engine with the Model A, it rode on a similar chassis but was larger and heavier. The truck used the same 201 cubic inch I-4 engine, producing 30 horsepower from the Model A with a 4-speed manual including a granny gear, and the original worm gear rear end was eventually replaced with a ring and pinion differential that had a 2-speed option. There were two wheelbase options available, 131.5 inches and 157 inches, and multiple bodies were available, including ambulance, pickup, dump truck, postal truck, and more, often by multiple coach builders, while Ford offered a light-duty Model A pickup as well. By the 1930s, Ford was replacing the Model A, and the Model AA truck was replaced with the BB series. It continued the practice of multiple body options from Coachworks, but now with a stronger frame, transmissions, and axles, and the option of a 221 cubic inch flathead V8 in the trucks by 1932. By 1932, there was a short run of customer products before the company shifted to wartime production, famously not only producing bombers, tank engines, trucks, vans, and station wagons, but producing Jeeps en masse. After the war ended, previous car designs were restarted and massaged until the 1949 lineup came out. But critically, the first F-Series truck was released in 1947 as a 1948 model. For the first time, the truck chassis was developed independently of the car line, while also allowing Ford to enter the medium and heavy-duty markets. Interestingly, in Canada, they were marketed under the Mercury line as the M Series. Ford trucks were the only trucks with an all-new design, with competitors like those from GM based on pre-war platforms. The frame included a third crossmember for strength. Ford was the first to offer telescopic shock absorbers, and Ford was the only company to offer V8s for pickups and medium-duty trucks until 1954. The cab was widened and taller while offering more footroom and was isolated from the chassis for increased comfort. There were 8 different chassis available, ranging from the F1 light duty to the F8 heavy duty. Multiple engines were offered, with a 226 cubic inch 6 and a 239 cubic inch V8 in the light duty trucks, producing 95 or 100 horsepower respectively. Larger and more powerful engines were offered on the heavy-duty models, but from here on we'll focus on the consumer-facing F-Series information. The second-generation F-Series spans only 1953 to 1956 model years in the U.S., notably shifting to the now famous 3-digit naming convention, with the half-ton F1 becoming the F100. The intention of this redesign was to increase the capability of the truck with higher payloads, a 20-inch deep bed, larger windows, improved steering and turning radius, and a wider cab. several notable changes were made. First is the 1954 model was the last to offer the 239 cubic inch flathead V8 in the US, as it was replaced with the overhead valve Y-block V8, making 130 horsepower. Engines were upsized and updated through the run. The standard transmission was a column-mounted 3-speed with an optional 3-speed with overdrive, a 4-speed manual with a granny gear, and a Ford-O-Matic 3-speed auto was finally offered. In 1956, the electric system was upgraded to a 12-volt, and the windshield wipers were now electric. The third generation of the F-Series, produced from 1957 to 1960, as Ford redesigned it to match contemporary offerings with wider bodywork and a clamshell hood. They now offered a flare side and style side boxes, and in 1959 became the first of the big three to offer factory-installed four-wheel drive options. Previous generations, four-wheel drive was an outsourced conversion to a Marmon Harrington. Noteworthy is this is the last generation of the panel van until the 1968 model year and the E-Series vans. The fourth generation ran from 1961 to 1966 and was lower, wider, and with the bedsides, hood, and cab all at the same height, and returning to two headlights for the next 50 years. From 1960 production to 1963, the F100 and F250 two-wheel drive models had an optional unibody integrated pickup where the cab and bed were one piece. In 1965, the model was heavily revised with an all-new frame on largely the same body. This frame moved away from the straight axle in the front to the famous independent twin I-beam suspension with coil springs on two-wheel drive trucks. Further, a four-door crew cab was introduced on the F250 and 350 models, while the 240 cubic inch and 300 cubic inch straight sixes and 352 V8 were introduced. With 208 horsepower, that V8 was the first time the F-Series passed 200 horsepower. Lastly, the Ranger nameplate debuted on the F-Series as a trim package in 1965, having previously been used on a base-level Edsel sedan. The fifth generation launched in 1966 for model year 67 and lasted through 1972. Carrying over the previous platform, the styling was heavily revised, roomier, and with multiple more engine options. It's worth mentioning that Ford had been offering special models for many years, and that continued with the Camper Special, the Explorer Special, the Contractor Special, and others. The sixth generation ran from 1973 to 79 and continued once again on the same platform, dating all the way back to 1965. During its run, the Super Cab Extended Cab was introduced, and in 1975, the now famous F-150 model was released as a higher payload version of the F-100 and intended to avoid emission standards with a higher gross vehicle weight, over 6,000 pounds. In 1977, the lineup became the best-selling truck in the U.S., a position it continues to hold to this day. The seventh generation was the first full redesign of the chassis and body since the 1965 model year and was a major and successful redesign, with the chassis used through 1998. In the interest of fuel economy, the trucks were slightly shorter, narrower, and lighter than before. The F100 was ended after 83, the Ranger trim ended after 81 to make room for their new Ranger compact pickup truck, and many comfort and convenience features began to make their way increasingly into trucks. For 1981, they introduced a 4.2-liter V8 with 115 horsepower on the F100 as the smallest displacement V8 offered on an American pickup. And in 82, they introduced a 3.8-liter V6 as standard on the F100, becoming the first V6 offered in the F-Series. By 86, the 5.8-liter and 4.9-liter, as well as the 4.9-liter i6, all received computer controls, with the 3.8-liter V6 having been discontinued. Also new to this model was the twin traction beam independent front suspension on four-wheel drive models based on that twin I-beam suspension. The eighth generation lasted from 87 to 91, carrying over the chassis and cab of the previous model, but streamlining and simplifying. Slightly facelifted outside with circular wheel arches, composite headlamps, and rear ABS was now standard. The interior was treated to a complete redesign, and flare side beds were discontinued. With the removal of the Ranger trims for their new, smaller truck, the F-Series trims were now custom, XL, XLT, Lariat, and Night package in 1991. By 1988, Ford became the first pickup line with only fuel-injected engines in the lineup, including an upsized 7.3-liter V8 diesel from International. For model year 92, the ninth generation debuted, lasting through 1998. It was now the third generation based on the 1980 chassis, and once again streamlined to improve aerodynamics, and the flare side bed also returned. Along with the improved exterior, the interior was updated with a new dash, new seats, and in some models like the extended cab, larger windows. The dash was updated again in 94 and made a driver's side airbag standard, along with keyless entry, CFC-free AC, CD, and more. Trim lines through the model run were both simplified and expanded, with the custom dropped and replaced with the special for 2 years, the XLT Night package in 1992 only, the SVT Lightning with a 240 horsepower version of the 5.8-liter V8, and an Eddie Bauer edition. Other powertrains were largely carried over from the previous generation. While the platform was used through 1998, the F-150 was replaced in 96 with the F-250 and 350s using that platform for the additional 2 years. The 10th generation was not only the first ground-up redesign since 1979, but was an almost radical rethinking of the truck. Lasting through 2004, Ford moved on from the twin I-beam suspension to an independent suspension. Starting overall work in late '89, by 1991 clay models had been developed, and Ford found focus groups disliked the softer styling. But Ford executives decided to plow ahead with this new aero philosophy, while hedging their position by keeping the previous model's production for several months. Ford's new design was accepted, so much so that sales increased from the previous generation's 750,000 to over 900,000 sales by 2001. As expected, there were many options, including the 2-door regular cab, a 3-door super cab, a Super Crew cab debuted in 1999 for the 2001 model year. Super cab trucks got 2 doors in 1999, 8-foot and 6-foot beds, and a choice of style side or flare side on the 6.5-foot bed. And multiple additions were rolled out, including the high-performance Lightning, Harley-Davidson, and King Ranch, a Sport 4x4, the FX4 model in 2002, STX, and more. Along with the massive redesign was an all-new lineup of more efficient engines as well, a new 4.2-liter V6, a 4.6, and a 5.4-liter Triton V8s. Of note was a variant offered in the 2002 Lincoln Blackwood, the first pickup for Lincoln ever. Based on the F-150 Super Crew and a concept vehicle that received positive reception, the Blackwood flopped in the marketplace, being canceled in the US after its first year. The 11th generation debuted for the 2004 model year with a more angular body compared to the more aero look of the previous generation. An exceptionally well-received model, it set the single-year record for truck sales with over 939,000 sold in 2005. Along with sharper edges on the exterior, Ford added their now recognizable step-down at the door windows, inspired by their Super Duty trucks as well as Kenworth, and once again tried a Lincoln version with the Mark LT between 2005 and 2008. Generally, this generation had 3 engine options: the 4.6-liter V8, a 5.4-liter V8 with 3 valves per cylinder, and a 4.2-liter V6 was added in 2005 for the regular cab 4x2 trucks. The trucks continued with multiple trim lines, including XL, STX, XLT, FX4, and Lariat, but also added various additions such as the FX2 4x2 appearance package, Harley-Davidson trims, a 60th anniversary edition in 2008, both a Saleen as well as a Foose edition using a Roush-developed powertrain. This edition ended in 2008, also being the last year a manual transmission F-150 was available. The 12th generation lasted from model year 2009 to 2014 and was another all-new model with chassis and extensive powertrain revisions. Work on this design had begun in November of 2003, just months after the manufacturing of the previous generation had begun. During development, Ford had planned on shelving the compact Ranger and reintroducing an F-100 midsize truck based on the F-150. The idea was canceled as the Ranger T6 Global platform was being developed. For the chassis, Ford focused on making it both lighter and stronger with improved payload and towing ability. Inside, they made it roomier while updating the quality of materials and more features such as adding Ford Sync. At launch, the 3-valve per cylinder 5.4-liter V8 was revised, now making 320 horsepower, a 4.6-liter 3-valve per cylinder V8 making 292, and a 2-valve per cylinder version of the 4.6 with 248 horsepower. And the previous 4.2-liter V6 was dropped. The V8s utilized the new Ford 6-speed automatic transmission, with the 2-valve V8 using a carryover 4-speed auto. For the 2011 model year, all new engines were unveiled: a 3.7-liter V6 and a 5.0-liter V8 from the Mustang, a 6.2-liter V8 from the Super Duty lineup, and a 3.5-liter twin-turbo EcoBoost V6, all using a 6-speed automatic. Trim lines were expanded, reaching 10 options by 2012, and of note was the 2010 model year introduction of the SVT Raptor, offering the high performance from the previous SVT Lightnings but focused on off-road performance. The 13th generation marked a major shift for Ford when it moved to an aluminum-intensive body. Lasting from model year 2015 to 2020, this generation was dramatically lighter, shaving off over 700 pounds, while adding multiple safety technologies like blind spot, adaptive cruise, rear cross traffic, and more. Ford had experimented with aluminum bodies before, but this was the first to make it into production, and the frame remained steel with a nearly 77% usage of high-strength steel throughout. As with the previous generation, there were 3 cab options: the 2-door regular, a 2+2 Super Cab, and the 4-door Super Crew, and 3 bed lengths of 5.5 feet, 6.5, and 8 feet, depending on the trim and cab chosen. While all versions used Ford's 6-speed transmission at launch, this was expanded when the Raptor was reintroduced in 2017 with a 10-speed automatic, which then propagated to the other engines. Throughout the model's run, there were 10 different engines available at different times. The model got a mild refresh in 2018, including revising the trapezoidal grille to an octagonal one, the 3-bar styling moving to a 2-bar, interior revisions mostly to the infotainment, and other mild touches throughout. Trim lines were pared down initially, with STX, FX2, FX4, Raptor Tremor, Harley-Davidson editions canceled, leaving the XL, XLT, and Lariat, King Ranch, Platinum, and Limited. These editions began returning over future years. The F-150's 14th generation and current iteration launched for the 2021 model year, looking similar to the previous generation while keeping the cab and box, but with over 90% of its parts being new and exterior styling massaged to improve aerodynamics. Regular cab and Super Cab have 6.5 or 8-foot beds, while the Super Crew has a 5.5 and 6.5 bed options. Powertrain options were largely the same as the last generation, but with some substantial changes. The 5.0-liter V8 received a cylinder deactivation system, a hybrid powertrain for the 3.5-liter V6 EcoBoost was offered, an all-new electric Lightning was introduced in 2022, and all engines now use Ford's 10-speed automatic transmission. Of course, the Raptor and Tremor editions returned as well. And in 2023, a Heritage edition celebrating 75 years of the F-Series was released. And in 2024, a major refreshing of the exterior styling, an available Pro Access tailgate, removing the 3.3-liter V6, making the 2.7-liter EcoBoost the standard engine of many models. The regular cab was available only on the XL trim, and much more, reducing ordering complexity for Ford by 90%. The F-150 went from being a humble workhorse to an absolute juggernaut, now being the best-selling vehicle, not just the best-selling truck, for over 47 years, and a cash cow for Ford. While GM's trucks may sell combined Chevy and GMC more than Ford in a specific year, and those days of 1 million sales a year are done for Ford, it is still massively successful, with Ford still selling over 750,000 F-Series in the previous year. While no vehicle is perfect, and competitors constantly nip at the heels of the F-150 in terms of features or functionality, Ford has done an enviable job decade after decade of improving their trucks and leading the industry, often showing others where the truck market might go to. But criticism is mounting, with more affordable and basic trucks giving way to ever more expensive models, alienating some buyers, and with increasing data showing trucks being involved in a higher percentage of both pedestrian and fatal crashes. There's opportunity for Ford to continue to rethink and revolutionize the light truck market with coming generations, and keep the F-150 as relevant and as it has been literally for decades. Thank you for being here, and a big shout out to my Patreon supporters who helped make this all possible. And if you support independent news opinions and histories like this, please show the channel some love. Thanks.